Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kezia. In this video, I will be making a comparison of UK, US, and Canada. So if you're in the process of applying to countries outside your home country and you're looking for places where you can apply to, you're looking for countries where you can apply to for your studies, I believe that this video would absolutely be the best video for you. But before I go on, please support me by subscribing to my channel, support me by liking, sharing, and dropping your comments on my videos. Let me just reiterate for the purpose of this video, I would only be talking about Canada, UK, and USA. So the first thing you want to consider if before you even start to apply to all these places is the application process, the application fee, test of English, and all of those things. This has to be one of the main factors why people choose countries of study. The first thing to consider while applying to these schools has to be the application process. So applying to Canadian and American universities can be a very long process. So for both Canadian and American schools, you have to write test of English. For most of the schools, you have to write IELTS exam. I believe that some of the schools in the UK too, you have to write test of English. But one thing that I'm certain of is that for UK universities, you don't have to pay application fees. You just have to apply directly and you would get your admission. But it is not the same for schools in Canada and the schools in USA because you have to pay application fee for some of these schools. You have to pay application fee for Canadian universities. You have to pay application fees for American universities. Whereas in the UK, the process is fairly easier. Mostly because you don't have to worry about IELTS exam, you don't have to worry about application fees, you don't have to worry about the timeline for your application, you don't have to worry about all of these things. If you have your documents together, if you have all the things that they require from you, the application is fairly faster than the ones in Canada and than the ones in the USA. If time is of essence to you, if application fee is something that you would consider that would be a factor for you in applying to some of these schools. Some people don't like to pay for application fees. I wasn't really interested in paying for application fees for some of the schools that I applied to. So that's why I decided to choose the UK. So if time is of essence to you, if you want to consider the application fee and the IELTS exam, having to write test of English and all of that, you may want to consider UK. So the second thing I'll talk about is the admission process and visa application. It is no news that UK has one of the fastest admission processes. This is why most people who want to leave their own country as soon as possible opt for the UK. This technically means that your wait time is less compared to Canada. As for the visa processing, Canada and the USA take longer. And that's because of factors that I really don't know about because they have to consider a lot of things. They are actually much more detailed in their visa processing. They are much more detailed in how they vet your documents that you provided. So for visa processing, the UK is really faster. For Canada, you basically have to apply for visa and wait for them to respond to you. For some people, this wait time is really frustrating because you don't know when they will get back to you. You don't know what they would get back to you with. You don't know if you get rejected. You don't know if you get accepted. You don't know what is going to happen after you've waited a long time for them to come back to you with with your application update. And this is one thing that you may want to consider as well. For the USA, it's a different ball game. I will be talking from the perspective of Nigerians. So right now, it is really hard to get visa interview appointments for Nigerians. So that's one of the things you may want to consider as well. But the good thing about that is that once you actually get your visa interview appointment, you get your feedback, like you get the result of your interview right there at the point where you do your interview. So you don't have to wait for response. You don't have to wait for anything. If they are denying you, they tell you right there and then. If they are giving you the visa, they tell you right there and then. And sometimes they tell you why they are denying you. And this application process, this visa processing can be really frustrating as well. So for the UK, they hardly deny student visas. The UK, they actually need money right now. So they are trying all their best to gather all the, based on Brexit and everything, they need a lot of money. They need to boost their economy. So they are giving visas to students at the moment, international students. Just get admission to any school, apply for your visa, and you will definitely get it. Whereas it is not certain for American universities, it is not certain it is not certain for Canada, it is not certain for the USA, because they might reject you based on one or two reasons. Even though they want students to come in and study, but they will not go out of their way to give you the visa, because if they realize that you're just going to come in and be a liability to their system, their whatever, they will just deny you straight off, regardless of how much you've paid for visa application, regardless of whatever amount you've paid for your school fees or anything, they will definitely reject you. If you don't mind the visa processing time, you may want to consider Canada and the USA over UK. Or you may even want to consider Canada and just leave USA and UK, depending on what your preference is, depending on what your aim is. So the next thing I'll be talking about is the distance from home. I would say this, that when I was applying for my master's program, this is one of the things that I put into consideration, because I didn't want to be far from home too much. So I wasn't really looking at places like Canada, and which is like 21 hours away. So I was looking at places like the UK, where I would just up on the plane in the morning and then get to the UK in the afternoon. That is just like 6 hours away. So that's one of the things that I considered before I made my decision. So this is one of the factors to consider when choosing your country of study as well. Some people like to be far away from home. Obviously, that's not my case. Some people like to stay closer to home. So if you're one of the people who like to stay closer to home, the UK is your choice. If you're one of the people who want to be far away from home as possible, you can go to Canada, you can go to USA. That before you even before you even plan to go back home, you will think of so many reasons. You will think of your hours on the flight. You will think of how many hours it will take for you to go back home. Based off on the factor of proximity, if you're in Nigeria, the UK is considerably closer to Nigeria. So you may want to consider that. But if you don't mind staying away from your home country, if you don't mind staying very far away from home, you may want to consider Canada and the USA. The next thing I'll talk about is long-term expectations and settlement, citizenship. I believe that most people who leave their home country to go and study in all these places, most people want to just settle there and obtain citizenship. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a second passport. Obviously, if your country's passport does not carry so much weight, so it would be best for you to have another passport. It would be best for you to obtain citizenship or permanent residency in somewhere other than your own country. So if you're one of the people who want to settle down in the places where they want to study at. So maybe you want to have citizenship in Canada, you want to have citizenship in the USA, you want to have citizenship in the UK. This is one of the things that you would have to consider as well. You may want to think about things, you may want to think about things like, how long will it take for me to settle? How long will it take for me to get my permanent residency? How long will it take for me to get my passport? I know that for the UK, the road to citizenship and ILR, that's indefinite leave to remain, is not really straightforward. So if you want to get your citizenship, you have to consider one or two routes. So if you go to the UK on student visa, you would have to switch to something else before you can get your passport. So most people, after they get their masters, they go on to do PhD, and after they do their PhD, they go on to do something else. Now that they've introduced post-study work visa, unfortunately, the post-study work visa in the UK does not count to your citizenship. It does not count towards your citizenship. So you have to think of so many other things to do. It would benefit you to think about getting a job that would sponsor you, and then your road to citizenship starts to count all over again. So imagine that you've done 1 year master's program, you've done 2 years post-study program, then you get a job that sponsors you while you're doing your post-study program. So you have to start all over again. So your root citizenship begins to count. That's the 5 years begins to count when you get the job. So that's one of the things that I really don't like about the UK. If you're looking to settle down, it takes a lot of effort for you. It takes a lot of money. You would have spent a lot of money, except you're one of the lucky ones who gets recruited from Nigeria based on work visa, and then you just go directly. Then that's really pretty much defined and straight for you. So you just know that you go to UK based on you go to the UK based on your the visa that you've gotten, and 5 years you get your ILR, you get your topmost 6, 7 years, you get your citizenship. I mean, the road is cut out for you. But if you're going based on student visa, you need to think about some of the other things that you have to do. I know this can be really it causes anxiety for a lot of people, and that's why you see people doing so many things. See people applying for asylum and all of those things. I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm just saying consider some of these things before you go and pick a country of study. Canada is really much more straightforward than USA and the UK in terms of citizenship, in terms of settling in the long term. Because in Canada, if you apply to a school that has DLI, and in that school you can get your postgraduate work permit, it's really pretty much straightforward for you. So top most 5, 6 years, you get your PR. So that's if you don't go directly to Canada as a permanent resident. That's really pretty much straightforward in my opinion. Whereas in the USA and the UK, you have to consider your options and figure out what route works best for you. In the USA in particular, it is even much more difficult to get a PR because once you go to the USA on your F1 visa, then you move on to OPT that allows you to work for a certain amount of time before you then, if you're lucky enough to get someone who would sponsor your H1B visa, that's the work permit, then you can be on the H1B visa for as long as possible except your company starts the green card processing for you, and which might take a long time. I know that for some companies it takes actually faster to get. For me, I like my things to be straightforward. If it's black, I want it to be black. If it's white, I want it to be white. I just don't like the in between. I don't like the idea of uncertainty. So if you're like me and you prefer to know what you're working with, you prefer to know what you're working towards, and you just don't like to wing things and just be like, let me go with the flow, let me do this and that, then I think Canada would be the best place for you because once you start your application process, once you start your application process and you are in the right place, you follow the right path, you know exactly what you're getting out of it. You know exactly where you're going to, unlike UK. UK too is actually a little bit straightforward if you pay your cards right. But the USA, I would not really vouch for that. But I have people who have gone to the USA to study, and right now they are in Canada or they just went to some other places because they cannot get their green card. The immigration process in the USA is not really as favorable to non-immigrants as other places, as Canada is, for example. So that's one of the things that I would say. If the reason why you want to study outside the country is for long-term residency, is for settlement, then you have to look at all of these factors. You have to look at which one would work best for you before you go ahead and apply. Next thing I'll talk about that I feel like people don't talk about so much is working as a dependent. So in places like the UK and Canada, as a student, you're allowed to work for 20 hours. And if you're a family person, maybe you have a spouse and you have children, you would want to consider your children as well. You want to consider your spouse. You want to consider so many factors when you're making your applications to these places, when you're choosing your country of study. So in the UK, if you have a wife or a husband, they can work and support you. So while you're doing your 20 hours, your dependent can do more than 20 hours. They can even do up to 40 hours if they have a chance, if they have the means. Like if they work for organizations where they can do 40 hours a week, fine, they can do that. In Canada as well, they can do that. You would continue to do your 20 hours while your spouse works and supplements the finances for your family, for your home. But in the USA, it is not like that. So the student is the only one allowed to work. So they can only do 20 hours as well. But the dependents that they brought into the country with them cannot work. So F2 visas cannot work. They can't do anything. They basically have to stay in the house because they expect that you, as the student, you have the capability, you have the capacity to provide for your family, just as you have stated in your application or whatever. So your dependent cannot work. Everything that has to do with finances in your home is on you. And I don't really know how people do that, because if I'm studying, I want support from other places as well. If you happen to have scholarship, if you happen to have companies who are paying you maybe to study outside, to study in the USA, maybe they're paying you per month, and what they're paying you is enough for your family, that's fine. Then your wife, your husband, or anyone that came with you can just stay in the house and not work and not do anything. So this is one thing that you want to consider. If you're trying to consider the US, you need to consider your family as well, if you're a family person. I will just come out and say this outrightly. USA takes the crown when it comes to scholarships and graduate assistant programs, because they would give you the space to grow. If you want to go into academics, they will give you the space to grow. There are so many graduate assistant positions that you would get into. Whereas in the UK, it is really, really scarce. Among the three countries I'm talking about today, you have more chances of getting scholarships in the US than in any of the other countries. I mean, you can go online, you can go on Twitter, you can go on websites, you will see so many scholarship opportunities in the USA. If you're not following my friend Dr. Muiwa on Twitter, you can just go follow them right now, because they post a lot of scholarships, they post a lot of opportunities for students. And when I go through some of these scholarship opportunities, I see that the USA has much more scholarships for people that are wanting to study in the USA. I feel like that actually has more, that actually makes the USA a place to go to for me. Because imagine studying and not having to worry about money, not having to worry about your tuition, not having to worry about so many other things like the ones in the UK worry about. I think that that takes the crown for me, if you ask me. I know there are scholarships available to UK students as well. I mean, we have Commonwealth Scholarship, we have PTF scholarships, we have so many scholarships for them as well. But some of these scholarships are also restricted to certain people. Some of these scholarships have so many strings attached to them. Like for some of these scholarships, you have to go back home after your study. You definitely have to go back home, because once you sign that contract, then there's nothing you can do about it. You have to go back home after your study. So if one of the reasons why you want to study outside the country is for long-term residency, then this scholarship will not be for you, except you find a way around it. I know so many people find a way around it, but then you will think about so many things that you would have lost in the process as well. Because I know that if you take this scholarship and you decide that you don't want to do it anymore, some of them require that you refund the money that they've paid to you. So everything they've disbursed to you, you have to repay them before they can let you go, before they can let you pursue your own route. So think about all of these things. Think about the money, the monetary aspect, and everything before you decide to go on this route. So for Canada, for USA, for UK, the scholarship terms and conditions are different. Look at the documents they give to you before you sign anything. If you need a professional to look over all these things for you before you sign them, then I would definitely advise that you look for a professional to look at all of these things for you, because you don't want to sign a scholarship contract that would not suit your long-term purposes. The other thing I will be talking about is the weather condition. So for Canada, obviously everyone knows that the weather in Canada is a little bit to the extreme. And the USA, there are places in the USA that the weather is also extreme. For the UK, it is pretty much black and white. There are times when it's cold, there are times when it's hot. So that's very straightforward. If you're someone who has conditions, health conditions that would not allow you to withstand the cold weather, think about places that will suit you. You can decide to go to the USA, to places in the USA where the weather is warm all year round. So that's another thing that you want to consider. And the last thing I will talk about is job prospects. Depending on what you study, depending on whatever your course is, you would have to think about getting a job as well. So I know for tech people right now, they can basically get a job in anywhere. So the world is like a tech ground right now. Anyone in tech can get a job anywhere. So if you're in some other sector and you want to practice, so let's say you are a lawyer and you want to do a master's in law, you may want to consider what the sector is saying for lawyers in the UK, in Canada, in US. Because these places, they have different laws. You have to write different exams. And if you won't mind writing these exams, then go ahead and choose any one of these places. And if you're in business as well, I know that business or MBAs and all of that, the US has more markets for them and they pay much more for them. So if that is your field, if that is your aim, if that is your goal, then USA is really the place for you, or Canada, or places like that. And if you are a doctor, I mean, if you are in healthcare and if you're in the healthcare sector, the UK is the market for healthcare. I have people in the USA who are really going to the UK right now because of it's easier to get a job in healthcare in the UK than it is for other places. In Canada, it is not easy. In the USA, it's not easy. You have to, if you're a doctor in the USA, you have to wait and then wait to be matched, and which is a whole lot of process and all of that. So you have to consider all of these things before you choose a place to study. You have to consider if the country you're going to will benefit your job prospects, if they would serve you, if they would help you better your life. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants to make money. I want to make money. You want to make money. That's why we all want to get this job. That's why we want to make our lives better. While I won't advise that you chase money and chase money and chase money, at the end of the day, I would advise that whatever you do should be able to serve you, to give you a considerable amount of income that would make you comfortable. So think about that as well. Thank you for watching this video. If you've watched this video and you found this video useful, you found it helpful, please drop your comments and share. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.